All right, let's try to get started here. My name is Jason Becker. This is Bob Miller. We're your MCs. I was hoping everybody did their homework and brought an extra person with them like we were told last time. We still got some empty tables here. We're going to have to do better at getting more people to come. All right, make sure you introduce yourself right at the table, put your name tags on, complete the information sign-in sheet that you have on your table. This is our logo for St. Clair County. It's Facilitation Advisory Committee for Education in St. Clair County. And yes, I did read it. I cannot memorize it yet, but I'm getting there. This is our facilitating team. Same team we had last time. We're trying to get more people are able to join if you'd like. This is our syllabus. Our next meeting is April 11th, and then May 9th, June 6th, but we need to get more people here for the April 11th meeting. This is our agenda going to be for tonight. We're going to have the welcome, the review of the previous session, some data information presentation, instructions for the small work group, then the small work group dialogue decisions, and then the small group reporting to a large group, and then we'll try and close the session up.
So this is again a similar summary that you provide us we provide you information and presentations. That group work activity then gets boiled down to verbatim responses. Excuse me. Then that executive summary is drafted, and eventually the school board will make a collective decision. This is you again.
Asking questions during the small group time is fine. There's also a sheet to fill out for questions or comments that can be answered at a later date. All that information will be available on the website. The last presentation, the verbatim, is all available on the website, so you can get that. Make sure you fill in your sign-in sheet so that everybody, you have all that information.
So I'm going to give us a brief recap then of what happened last time. Some of you may have been here, some of you may not. We asked people in the small groups to celebrate the successes, what's going right. And the groups told us technology. We had a caring administration and staff. There's been good communication between the school and home. The community and parents are involved. And if you're around schools that are any at all, you know that this is a really important factor, and the staff is committed to the school. Greatest surprise, finances. I don't know why in the state of Illinois finances would be an issue, but lack of funding, competitive tax rate. I mean, as people learn, and if you've looked at the information, the tax rate here in Smithton is really pretty competitive with most of the districts in St. Clair County. And then over time, Dr. Holmes explained how there's been a loss of revenue, reduction in state aid, etc. Enrollment has seen steady growth. We identified that percentage of low-income students, and some were surprised to know that we had a portable classroom. Probably not parents of children in school, but for instance, I was when I came up here some time ago to get recruited into this position. Greatest concern, funding, lack of space, and security. So security is always an ongoing issue in a lot of venues today. In the second session, in the second part of that, last time we talked about 21st century learning, staying current with technology, focus on STEM, science, technology, math, I'm forgetting the other one. Engineering and math. Continue development of student character, create curious minds, encourage student research, Expand cursive writing. I didn't know we still did that. Increase communication with parents, continue small class sizes, increase parent involvement, increase building space, enhance after-hours internet safety on Chromebooks. The third assignment, improvements for the future. Maintain the momentum for technology. If we're going to have a 1-to-1 student ratio to a Chromebook, it costs money. Maintain and attract quality staff. If we're going to retain those people, we have to pay fair wages. Small class sizes are always important. They're preferred. Expand the facilities if it's going to fit that 21st century learning. Improve safety and security. Fire sprinkling in the entire building. ADA compliance in the entire building. And then eliminate the portable building. Fourth assignment, improvements, funding options. Jason showed you that FACES slide, and part of that is a St. Clair County initiative that if you follow the vote in the last election here, you saw certain counties that put that on the ballot, and you can pass up to a 1% sales tax. That sales tax can only be used for capital improvements or to pay down debt associated with capital improvements. So that's the St. Clair County Sales Tax Initiative. You'll find out more about that. That's not our primary purpose here, but we wanted to give you that information. How do you fund improvements? A lot of times district float bonds. It's important to maintain fiscal conservatism. We can't spend a lot more money than we have. Eventually that catches us. We seek grants. We consider the district owns farmland south of town. We could sell the farmland. Fundraising, economic development in the community. The more the community grows, the more businesses that come here, the more tax dollars. Takes a little burden off of the residential. Involving large landowners in the community, live within current means, cut current expenses. So, top priorities: building safety and security, comprehensive funding, maintaining technology, communication with the community, facilities, improve and expand, cut expenses, maintain a quality education, strong test scores. Other suggestions and comments. A lot of people talk about how proud they were of teacher dedication and the test scores. They liked the post video and the notes online. We really want to eliminate the portable classrooms. It's not a sense of a source of pride, or it's a temporary solution but not a permanent one. It's important to keep the community up to speed. That's part of this purpose, is to engage people, help them to understand what the challenges are and how you want us to face those. Consider a curriculum specialist. Consider town hall meetings. Again, means of communication. Consolidation of Smithton and Freeburg junior highs. Those are options. We're not pushing one or the other. We're looking for input. Outline administration and staff's top priorities. Reduce out-of-pocket costs of teachers. It's not really fair they have to come out of pocket and pay for this stuff because they're not funded. How to cover the cost of teachers' increased education. So tonight we're going to have, for the informational part, we're going to have Dr. Holmes, who I believe you're lucky to have, and then Mr. Art Hayhurst and Andy Steele from FGM Architects. A little bit about Art and Andy, since you probably know a little bit about Dr. Holmes. I'm going to have to grab my glasses. For a little background, why are the architects here? Well, the district periodically has to complete a 10-year health, life, safety audit for the school. The school has to do that to remain in compliance with Illinois law governing school facility assessments. Having ended its relationship with the district's prior architect, the school board administration completed a competitive review of 5 prospective firms and selected FGM in August of 2015. FGM then completed the health, life, safety audit in December, the results of which will be shared at the next community engagement session. Given the fourth element of 21st century education is learning environment, we invited them tonight to share their point of view about best practices. They have been engaged in different schools around the state and are using best practices to support 21st century education. Art Hayhurst is the principal in charge for Smithton School, has a long-standing familiarity with Smithton School and our staff, having led not only the recent Health Life Safety audit, but also the audit completed in 2005. Andy Steele is the Senior Associate and Project Manager. He also grew up here in Smithton. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. I believe, Dr. Holmes, you're going to start first? Dr. Holmes.
Thank you, Bob and Jason. I really appreciate that. And I, too, are glad to have Andy and Art here this evening. Clicker. So if you were with us last time, we covered really what we said was the state of the district presentation. We looked at a comprehensive assessment of the school in terms of its finances, its facilities, the curriculum and instruction. Tonight's focus is really on looking outside of just what we have here at Smithton School and thinking about what it means when you say 21st century education. So we're well into the 21st century, although that is still the buzzword that's used when you're talking about thinking about education, learning environments. So I'm going to just touch on briefly what the research tells us about 21st century education, what the support systems are that are necessary to have in place for an effective educational system. And then after, we'll have Art and Andy share some things about that fourth support system. And then I'll come back to sort of wrap up what we're doing here in line with what the research says is best practice for 21st century education. And I've also had the opportunity to survey staff and students about what they feel is the effective types of instructional activities that are going on, or which ways students like to learn best. So I think you'll find that rather interesting. So the research, there's a lot of information on these slides, and I'm not going to read it all to you. I'm going to hit on just a few points that you have that in the PowerPoint. And additionally, just to sort of reiterate what Bob and Jason said earlier, we will post the full PowerPoint yet this week on the FACES website. So if it's small and your binoculars, your bifocals don't work any better than mine, you can see the full size online. So basically in the 21st century education, we see students working in teams. So those of you that are my generation, again, I can go back to my fourth grade classroom at Berryville Elementary in Summers, Wisconsin, and remember the rows and columns in the classroom, and that was how you learned. And if you were in trouble or you had bad eyesight, you sat up in the front, and everybody else sort of fell in the pecking order. But what we know about effective teaching and learning today is that students have to work in teams, they have to collaborate to help one another. Teachers help students ask tough questions. So keep in mind, it used to be that teachers always had to ask the tough questions, but now we want students thinking about those questions and helping to frame the questions themselves. Students apply their knowledge and prove what they know by presenting to their classmates or to their teacher, and parents support their students and the school. So those are the four key elements to what an effective 21st century education looks like. The P21 Council, which was an organization that encompasses businesses, colleges, K-12 schools, came together about a decade ago and put together what they felt was a research-based framework for the 21st century education. And so you'll see the upper skills sort of in the colors at the top, where we're looking at core subjects, reading, mathematics, writing, etc., life and career skills, technology skills, and then we have those 4 C's that we talked about last time. And in your handout beyond the PowerPoint, you'll see a sheet that has those 4 C's broken down by more detail. What those actually mean, what collaboration means, etc. And then as a foundational system, we have 4 elements: standards and assessment, curriculum and instruction, professional development, and then the learning environment is the largest group there at the bottom. So the learning environment is not only the physical facility, but it's the climate, it's the instructional materials, etc. Talking a little bit about standards and assessment, and I'm going to just touch briefly on these. When you think about standards and assessment, I want you to think about this. Many of you have probably gone to the doctor to have your blood pressure checked. That's a pretty routine thing, right? There's a standard for what your blood pressure should be. Something over something. So you go in and your doctor does a diagnostic assessment to see whether or not you're meeting the standard. Assessment standards. If your blood pressure is high, your doctor is concerned, right? And he has to apply some sort of intervention to try to bring your blood pressure to the standard level. And then following that, your doctor is going to continue to progress monitor you by either having you take your blood pressure daily, or he's going to have you come back in a week, or you're going to have to check it periodically to make sure that you're staying within the standard. So academic standards are really nothing more than identifying what it is that students should be able to know and do, and then we assess them to determine whether or not they are learning what needs to be learned. There are all kinds of assessments. We talked a little bit about this the last time. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but there are day-to-day types of assessments that teachers perform to determine whether kids get it. After Terry, for example, has worked with a small group of kids, she can tell, right? Because she's an educator, that you're getting it because I can see the light bulb comes on, or you look completely confused, and therefore I didn't get through to you. So there's these informal types of assessments. We also use things called exit tickets, where children can write things and leave them behind so the teacher can look to see if they got it or not. Then we have formal assessments and the summative assessments, exams, portfolios, that type of thing. And we're doing a lot of portfolio work here, digital portfolios, even with young children in kindergarten. So keeping examples of what they do, not necessarily what their test score was at one point in time. This standards and assessment, just what I wanted to reference again, this is a handout in your packet. These are the 4 C's. Today's world demands greater skills in these areas. And so we build our curriculum around these 4 C's. Then we have different instructional approaches. So we move from standards and assessment to curriculum and instruction. And along the left-hand side of the column here, you see things like multiple intelligences, cooperative learning, tiered lessons, learning centers, and graphic organizers. Those are all types of instructional strategies that teachers develop so that they can work with students to help them learn. One size fits all doesn't work anymore, and so with the advent of technology, we're able to even further differentiate what one child needs versus what another child needs. Cooperative learning, learning in groups, learning to get along, those kinds of things. Graphic organizers, many of us need visuals to help us learn, and so graphic organizers is a strategy that we use to teach students how to remember things visually. One thing about today's environment compared to when you and I went to school, the teacher was king or queen, and what you taught, well, what they taught, they felt we needed to learn. In today's environment, kids want to be entertained more than ever. And so that becomes a difficult situation. My 14-month-old granddaughter knows how to operate my iPhone. She can swipe and move from picture to picture and pull up games. It's amazing to me that they almost come out of the womb knowing how to do these things. So they get to school as kindergartners, and the last thing they want to do is sit there and listen to a teacher lecture at them for 30 minutes. So learning to be an effective teacher in today's environment is a challenge. Professional development, that's a part of learning for teachers that goes on throughout their professional career. What we do know, and one thing I want to point out, is that on average, it takes 20 instances of practicing a new skill before a teacher can actually really get it. not unlike you and I. If I'm learning to be a basketball player, I can't just go out on the court and dribble one time and know I got it. So you have to apply these things. And good professional development is long lasting. We have a great professional development program in place this year. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. So then we move into the fourth system of support, and that's the learning environment. And that's where I'm going to introduce Andy and Art, and they're going to talk a little bit about those 4 C's and how that looks in the physical environment.
Well, good evening. I'm Andy Steele, and I'm with FGM Architects. Some of you have probably seen me around town here. I did grow up here. With me is Art Hayhurst, who is the principal in charge at FGM. A little bit about FGM. We focus on K-12 education, Art and I do. We have around 90 school districts in Illinois that we work with, and 60 of them being in our region. So we're pretty spread out throughout the state. And this is a hot button item across the state right now, especially with growing districts and growing communities, is what is going to take place in the learning environment to reach the 4 C's of these skills. So to recap, the 4 C's that you saw in the puzzle piece: creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. Well, these are our goals. What kind of spaces do we need to get there? So the spaces that we need to look at or focus on are spaces that provide variety, flexibility, agility, adaptability, intentionality, interconnectedness, and technology. That's a lot. So when we look at how we make that happen, whether it's an existing school and how we take spaces to accommodate that, or the spaces in the school adequate enough to make this happen, we used to look at a guideline essentially, and when we start looking at things and planning things, you take the book and you look at it and it give us a prescription of how many square feet you need, what kind of infrastructure you need. Well, those are all great, but they don't meet what districts need. Each district is different, each district requirement is different, each one likes to teach a different way. And so we look at that as a baseline, but then we really need stakeholder involvement with the district, with the community groups, to figure out what is the best approach for the district. We talk about how much square footage you need in a room, what kind of technology infrastructure you need, and just things that we don't normally think about that affect the environment: the acoustics, the lighting, fresh air, natural light, things of that nature. Yes, this is the old way, or the current way, part of the old way, and part of the new way all at the same time. The new process is really, it's an engagement process with all stakeholders, very similar to what the district is doing right now with all of you. Trying to get as much information from everyone: parents, teachers, administrators, citizens, to kind of see what they feel is the best need. And by doing that, you develop new space types within a facility. What we're seeing is, like Sue mentioned, a lot of group work, collaboration. So they're broken down into several areas: large group areas, casual student spaces, personal spaces, small groups and classrooms, and then exterior classrooms or outdoor classrooms. Personal spaces are designed to be more like 1 to 3 student spaces, whether it's for a student they can work on their own, or they can do pairs or small groups. Some of these you see in real quiet areas so they can focus. Some of them are in noisier, more active areas. The small group is intended to accommodate 5 to 10 students. It's really the kitchen table type atmosphere you're trying to generate. It's where you're trying to get small groups of kids together to focus on a project or start their work. A group space is very similar to that. It's just designed to accommodate a larger group, whether it's 10 to 12 students, up to 15 students. In a classroom, classrooms take on various shapes and sizes now. They're not just the standard 700 square foot rows of desks like you mentioned.
You're starting to fade out. Can you hold the microphone?
Yes. Is that better? Okay. So classrooms, as I mentioned, they change in shape and size now. It's not the standard boxes you used to see. Some of the images here. What we're showing you graphically, it's not just K-8 education. This is kind of showing you what we're seeing across the board from pre-K to 8 all the way to high school, college, and things of that nature. So some of these spaces are more focused towards maybe the older grades or when they get into high school, when they get into college. But the format is still there. Casual student spaces, those are kind of geared to more just breakout, social space. Kids get together to talk about what they're learning, what experiencing in life, what's going on in current events. A lot of times you see them more commonly in some high school spaces, maybe even universities, junior colleges, things of that nature. And then the exterior classroom is something we're kind of seeing more of, outdoor learning environments. You know, the research is there that kids learn better when they're in an environment that's immersed in natural light, natural ventilation. You know, in a dark, damp, small classroom held in the middle of a room with no light or natural light. So these spaces are designed to be more outdoor gathering spaces, but also tiered and set up to develop teaching spaces as well. Technology, it's kind of a broad term. That's whatever infrastructure and tools the district is using in their curriculum, what they like to use. And then the support spaces are, you know, things in storage areas, places you can check out electronics, things of that nature. Today's schools cannot be reduced to just functional requirements. It's really a process of working with stakeholders and everyone involved to figure what spaces are needed and how to get there. So now I'll kind of show you a few just like case studies that we've gone through or we've worked in the past. This is Westland High School, which is in Trenton, Illinois. It just finished a couple years ago. This contains a lot of the spaces that we've discussed already. Large breakout spaces, small collaborative spaces. The big space you see in the top right is what they call their cafetorium. It triples as a large gathering collaborative space, a theater, as well as a cafeteria space. Hadley Middle School Library. This kind of first took a library concept, as you're seeing now, a media center, and really turned it into a 21st century flexible space. We've all seen the libraries where the circulation desk is built in, furniture's kind of stuck, tall books stacked. This kind of takes that and throws out the window. Everything in the space is movable, portable. Even the separating walls you see as glass walls are accordion style that you can fold up and really expand the space. They use this for classroom instruction, general labs, and even they've taken all the furniture out of the space and used it as a presentation space when speakers come in. Really hitting that flexible environment. Sycamore School here, they kind of took a situation where they didn't have enough space to meet all their goals, but they had some excess space that they could get rid of. And by doing that, they added the much needed science lab space that they really needed in the program, but they basically removed multiple classrooms to provide these large flexible spaces that people can use, or students can use in multiple ways for collaboration spaces, breakout spaces, presentation areas, things of that nature. Extended learning areas, we kind of hit on all of them. They're just large flexible spaces that just kind of generate creativeness out of your students. You provide the infrastructure and the tools, whether it be communication boards, projectors, smart boards, the resources that they need to basically get their creativeness rolling. And each space doesn't have to be the same. We experience it a lot where districts have areas where they might have one space or one type of education that they're going to have in one area, and they want similar infrastructure, similar tools, but they have a totally different curriculum in mind for the other spaces. So just a brief recap of 21st century classroom spaces. They're spaces that, you know, they're collaborative, they develop problem solving, they can be any kind of laboratory space, and as well as kind of like a studio and art type of creative space. Teachers are really no longer here to stand at the front of the room and just teach, and they're designed for just letting kids learn. I mean, utilize tools, hands-on, figure things out for themselves. All the spaces rely heavily on technology now. It's just the way education is turning. And then inquiry-based learning units that require students to flow from activity to activity. It's just ways that you can get the creativeness moving. Like Sue mentioned, you have to have a really powerful, interesting space in order to really keep that happening now with the way things have changed in society. So I'm going to turn it over to Art. He's going to discuss things that we're seeing in regards to furniture and spaces.
So as you can see, a lot of the spaces have changed, but not necessarily in just buying furniture and just buying new rooms and new ways of doing it. The kids learn in different ways, and that's nothing new. This has been coming about for many, many years, but now we have furniture that allows us to adapt within an existing room easily. And you've already been doing that in a number of spaces. You've already made changes in your classrooms with the furniture to be able to create. You take the individual chairs and you're able to combine them together and create multiple little spaces. That's just one way of doing it. The method they're using is the fact that we know that all the kids learn at a different rate. All the results have shown us that. I've got that with my own kids. Even though they're in college now and out of college, one was able to go to class and learn in class. The other one went to college for 2 years, came home, now he's doing online better than he did when he was in class. Everybody's a little bit different. So by using collaborative spaces, you're putting the students together as a small team, which they may function better with, and going into a large group. So by using the furniture, we're able to do that, something that wasn't there available before. So that creates classrooms that give us multiple ways of laying things out, even a stage area that can be performed inside a small room. So the functionality is something that happens by being able to open up rooms and create that access. Traditional ways can work for assemblies, but in most parts you see that we are able to collaborate by using mobile furniture. The Hadley library that you were looking at before, that Andy was talking about, that actually was an old library just like yourself, just like the one you have. It was just individual chairs that were laid out, and basically we took that space and opened it up and created movable walls, movable furniture. Even the reception desk that was in that room can be moved over to the side and creates that entire library can be shifted out of the way, and that's what he was talking about. You're able to create an assembly room. It could be a teacher's room. It could be students doing performance, and it gives you multiple functions out of one room versus the old way where we only have one thing we can do. And we can only do that by mobile and adjoining furniture. We create walls. Now, we used to not tell the kids to write on the walls, but now we can do more things with that we're able to do movable walls and surface materials that allow us to write and mark and project. I don't know if you have those in here, the projections that actually is nothing more than a light that shines down on the table, and you can project on the wall multiple things that you're doing and show the kids as you're moving them around. Technology has made it unlimited. The abilities are out there. So many ways that you can function and convert things in rooms into creating small groups, large groups, to teach easier. Sitting is the new smoking, meaning quit sitting is what they're talking about. And we have ways to have tables that are able to move up and down. That's what they're talking about. Basically, those are multi-level stations that you can work from. They also make those in another way, and I'm not sure if that's on this screen or not. Go to the next one. There are chairs that you can set up that line up in a row. So you've got this row of students in the front. The next row can actually elevate their chair and desk up, and the back row even goes higher. So you're either collaborating by bringing them together, all sitting at the same level, or you can take them back and have somebody do an instruction in the front. And you haven't changed furniture, you're using the same furniture. That's just one of the things we're seeing across the country with multiple ways of being able to adapt to create the teaching lessons. That's all we've got. Thank you.
Couple of things that Art and Andy talked a little bit about that we already started to implement when you were talking about the tiered desks. In our science lab, Samantha Heather is our junior high science teacher, and when we replaced her science tables this past year, she wanted tables that could stair step. so that the students in the back would be higher than the students in the front. So that's an application that we've already started to experience. And then the local Knights of Columbus chapter here in Smithton was generous with us about a month ago and donated $2,500 from their Tootsie Roll monies to our special education classrooms. And so with that money, we were able to buy some really unique seating options for kids that sometimes have a difficult time sitting still. And we were also able to purchase some pedalers. So when you're sitting at the desk, imagine yourself getting your 10,000 steps during the day by propelling a bicycle-type device. But kids that have that anxiety or have that need for movement, that's a way for them to stay busy while they're learning. They also put in some lighting adapters in the classroom because sometimes those children have difficulty under fluorescent lights. So that money was able to go to those classrooms and really provide some unique tools. All right, Smithton's school steps towards the 21st century. So I'm going to look back at those 4 structure systems. If you remember, the first one we talked about was standards and assessment, and then we talked about curriculum and instruction, then we talked about professional development, and lastly we talked a little bit about the learning environment. So with regard to that, what is our school doing that is towards 21st century education? So we adopted the use of some nationally normed assessments. We talked a little bit about that the first time that we're using to help us determine whether students are meeting those standards. Remember the blood pressure example. What can we use to assess whether kids are meeting what it is we expect them to meet? We're working on grade level specific common assessments. So all my first grade teachers are working together to develop assessments that they can give within their classroom based on their instruction. Focus on continual data analysis. That's something our teachers have spent a great deal of time over the last 2.5 years, really digging down into the data. And so when those students take those assessments, they no longer just say, well, they did okay. They actually look at it and see where each student is and where they need to maybe modify their instruction. Development of a park preparation program. We know, at least for the foreseeable future, that the new state assessment, the park, if you will, is not going away in Illinois, despite the fact that nationally that actual assessment is being dropped by many states. Missouri uses one called Smarter Balance, but between those 2 assessments, that represents less than 50% of the U.S. Adoption and gradual implementation of standards-based grading. This year, kindergarten and first grade teachers went from using a traditional A, B, C, D, F system to using something that's very much more specific based on the standards and whether or not the students are meeting those standards. So, and the feedback from parents has been really positive, and the teachers. I think one of the quotes, and I see one of my kindergarten teachers in here, is that they know the students far more than they've ever known them before. Curriculum and instruction, we're working on vertical and horizontal alignment of our curriculum. What the heck does that mean? Well, that means that what I'm teaching in kindergarten ought to be preparing kids for what they need to learn in first grade. And what's happening in 4th grade ought to be what's preparing them for 5th grade. And 5th grade needs to understand, hey, if I like to teach this particular subject in 5th grade, is that already been taught in 4th grade? So they're no longer silos, but it's a system of movement. And likewise, what we're doing here and how that prepares students for moving on to the high school. Just a shout out to our fantastic science teacher who I believe 75% of our graduating 8th graders qualified for advanced science classes as 9th graders in high school. So just a side note. STEM offerings, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, very excited. Again, this summer we have camp convention, but we also have kids that are going to be working on building BMX bikes from scratch with nuts and bolts and doing physics experiments. And we'll have 7th graders that get to fly airplanes. They'll get to actually be the pilot. Once the pilot takes them up, they don't let them take off or land, but they do let them pilot the plane mid-air. Academic intervention for reading and mathematics, we have 2 great RTI teachers. What we heard last time was, gosh, that's not enough. We've heard that before. But given the need for us to balance our finances, that's what we're able to provide right now. We do a fantastic job. Summer program for struggling K-3 readers. This will be the first time ever that we've offered a summer intervention program for our struggling readers. And extracurricular programming, lots of great things for kids to get involved with after the school day. Professional development, we have a PLC framework, professional learning communities, where teachers work together collaboratively to help learn, just like we want kids to learn. We developed a program called Smithton University this year. It was highly successful. Teachers are teaching teachers after school how to use technology. And they're graduating, so our graduation ceremony is May 31st. Not caps and gowns, but almost to that level. So we're excited about that. Workshops focused on small group instructional strategies. Just a side note, Mrs. Norton and I had a great opportunity last spring to travel to a town called Mooresville, North Carolina. You may have never heard of it, but it is the highest performing school district in the state of North Carolina. They eclipsed the Raleigh-Durham area, which is known for one small university that you might have heard of that has a good basketball program, if you follow that sort of thing. But nevertheless, they were known for their academics, and Mooresville, 60% free and reduced lunch kids, very diverse, eclipsed and became the top performing school district. They are the top performing technology implementation district. I put us on the waiting list when I got here, and it only took us 2 years to move to the top, so they invited us down at no charge to visit their classrooms. And what we saw was this. Kids were working in groups. Kids were using technology, and they were differentiating their instruction. So we came back saying, you know what, we have technology, and we're doing a pretty good job of getting it into kids' hands, but what we're not doing a good job at is having kids really working together in groups and doing cooperative learning. So we had some folks come in last summer to help provide some workshops, and that's an area we're continually working on. I'm looking back there at Mr. Lester, knowing that he works for Ralston Farina, is that right? Or is it just Farina? Okay, Farina. And I know the kind of work he does, and I would say that you probably work in groups, because I know that you do a lot of brainstorming. And so that's what kids have to be able to do when they get out of school. They can't just work typically independent of one another. We've become members of the Character Plus group in St. Louis. We are a member of the Regional Office of Education PD, Cooperative Professional Development Cooperative. We are participating in conferences as well as presenting at conferences. All right, so taking a side step, let's take a look at surveys. Last time one of the tables that was here reported out, but they really like to know what the teachers were thinking here. And so I surveyed them. So in terms of looking at those instructional strategies, the curriculum and instruction piece, I asked teachers, which of those instructional strategies that is most common are you using, and what percentage of the day are you using them? So on average, 42% of the teacher's day is spent in whole group instruction, meaning the teachers up here reading a book or leading a discussion. Small group instruction, 15%. There may be small groups and one teacher sitting with one group working with that small group and other groups working independently. Collaborative learning, 18% of the time. Independent learning, 18%. And one-on-one instruction, 7%. So if you add these two together, 18 and 15, you have a significant amount of time that kids are spending in small groups here, as opposed to historically how that looked, and we're still trying to move more even to that grouping. My favorite teacher uses the following ways to teach my class. So we asked students, think about your favorite teacher or the one that you've learned the most from, and how does that teacher teach? So 36% of the kids said whole group instruction, But then if you add again the grouping, 13% teacher-led small group and 24% student-led groups, you can see that grouping represents 37% of where students think they're really learning and their effective and favorite teacher, which is typically one and the same, how they're doing that. Ask them, tell me about your most effective teacher. What is it about that teacher? And I won't go through all these because we'll run out of time, but you can certainly take a look at them. There are things that you won't be surprised about, but there are things that I think you will be. The most effective teacher I've had won't tolerate distractions. Adds stories to our learning. Lets us express our minds. Honest. Group work. Helps me understand my mistakes. Engages us in good conversation. So those kids, and those were students 4th grade through 8th grade that answered the survey. Here's a few things. My teacher genuinely engages with the students and makes eye contact to make sure we are understanding. That goes back to that informal assessment that I talked about earlier. She teaches the subject that she loves and puts herself in our shoes. She also uses hands-on activities. She uses interactive ways. She lets us work as a class, in groups, and as alone. My teacher was strict about homework, which taught me a lot about responsibility. She has a sense of humor. She prepared us for high school. Not only does she teach us in a fun way, but she teaches us that it's important to have good character and not give up on something just because it's difficult. Finally, our learning environment, our support system number 4, we have one-to-one technology. We have upgraded our technology infrastructure, meaning that we have adequate bandwidth currently for the technology we have in place. We've put a number of communication vehicles in place. New flexible grouping classroom furniture, although some teachers would say I couldn't really get the furniture I wanted because the space in my portable classroom wasn't big enough. Or my space in the 1953 portion of the building wasn't big enough. We've increased our safety and security measures to the degree possible, having a portable classroom. It's hard to find a 21st century skill that technology does not support. It enhances thinking and innovation skills, allows access to a vast world of information, and you can see the others: communication, presentation. As a teachers, how many of you utilize technology to demonstrate or teach during the day? 100% said they do. Do students utilize technology in your classroom? 100% said the students use technology. During an average day, what percent of time are students using technology? 48% of the day. Students, I like having a Chromebook to help me learn. 89% say yes. 11% said no. I actually had one student who said, I prefer to write out my answers from time to time. I get tired of typing it in the Chromebook. I like having a Chromebook to complete my assignments. 84% yes, 16% no. When considering your preferred instructional strategies, does your current classroom present any challenges? This goes back to teachers. 63% said yes, 37% said no. And then basically, what were those challenges? Primarily space, storage, electrical capacity, and lighting. And then these are a few quotes from the teachers. Space is a huge issue. A lot of these quotes that you'll read really speak to the fact that when thinking about grouping students and making those separate instructional spaces, they just simply don't have room in the classroom to do that. Classroom is small, the lighting is a challenge, electrical outlets are almost non-existent, and so those are the main areas of concern on the survey. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Bob and Jason for the small group work activity. Thank you.
Okay, the small group activities is Somebody is going to be recorded responsible for completing the information on the group worksheet. And the other one, we need a facilitator's responsibility is going to be to facilitate the decisions, keep the group focused on task, report the group's information. There's an information worksheet that reflects the consensus of the group itself. Monitor progress to keep the worksheets in a lot of time. Bob's going to fire up the score clock here and give you 20 minutes to complete this task. This is old school timing as opposed to the new school way of doing things. And only the group's recording worksheet will be collected.
So I guess I'm old school. At your table, you have a colored worksheet activity. Mine's white, but yours is colored. And somebody needs to take control of that as the recorder. So each group needs to select a recorder. Do we want to, Jennifer, perhaps you join up here. You've got to have at least 3 or 4 at your table. So each group select a recorder and a facilitator spokesperson. The activities are identified there. You can see those activities. We've got 20 minutes allotted for this first activity. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Somebody will come to your table. We're doing task number 1, ideas for making continued progress. So let's go ahead and get started on that activity. I don't know if I need that coordinate up to there. I'm going to start my class. This coordinate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. No, that's good.